Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you're at in the world. My name is Alice, and I am the editorial director of Deem Journal, and this is the third and final session of our online forum for issue 3. Just in case this is your first time joining us for the forum around the release of each issue, we usually host about 3 live virtual sessions with a combination of contributors and guests as a way for us to touch base with our readers and just generally our community. And we're always looking for ways to go beyond print and have more real interactions with each other. We just recently put out issue 3, Envisioning Equity. And it's always the case that while we are preparing content for print, you'll also notice certain ideas or hopes or concerns that are coming up again for across different stories. So for this session, we have chosen to address the theme of motherhood. And so I will be handing over the mic to Marcel Rosa-Salas, our moderator. But before I do that, I wanted to let everybody know a few things for us to have a good time here today. One, closed captions are available and in the link on the YouTube page. Today, we have 2 wonderful ASL interpreters that are joining us, Flo and Susan. And lastly, if you have any questions that arise during the session, please write them in the chat box, and I will compile them and share them with Marcel for the Q&A that will happen towards the end of the conversation. So without further ado, I will pass the mic to Marcel.
Thank you so much, Alice, for that kind introduction, and welcome everyone to this session on motherhood and design today. I'm super excited and honored, really, to be in conversation with these 3 wonderful people today, and really have the chance to, have space to reflect on what it means for design and motherhood to be considered intertwined, and also to think about how design can be put to use to create more equitable life experiences for mothers, for parents, and for the people that we care for. This discussion, at least for me, is coming at a kind of significant time in my life personally, because actually tomorrow marks exactly 9 months to the day where I became a mother myself for the first time. And so to say that, my life has been transformed by motherhood seems like an understatement, right? Becoming a mother has recalibrated my identity. It has changed my relationships. It has upended my priorities, and it is, I think, really attuned, my senses to an entirely new way of experiencing life, and especially how the world around me is designed. So I've also experienced too how things as seemingly trivial as the everyday, baby items like the baby carrier, the bottle, and as things as consequential as parental leave policies are also connected together by the power of design and design choices, and how the power of these choices are really part and parcel to how motherhood and how parenthood are experienced. And so with that, I kind of want to kick off our conversation with our 3 fantastic panelists. Perhaps we can start off by kind of defining some key terms. The session is about motherhood. What exactly does that mean to each of our panelists? And I would also like to ask, when you offer your definition, if you could just introduce yourselves to our audience today. So that's the first question I have. What do we mean by motherhood here?
I can go first. And Zoe, maybe you'll also want to tag in on this. My name is Gabriella Nelson. I'm the Associate Director of Policy at a nonprofit in Philadelphia called Maternity Care Coalition. I'm also one of the curators for the Designing Motherhood project with Zoe, and so many awesome people who I hope are here today. Michelle, Juliana, and Amber, they might be in the audience. But Designing Motherhood, the name, I guess if you're not a part of the project, you would just hear the name and assume certain things about, thank you, LinYee. You would assume certain things about maybe what's in the book just based off of the title, Motherhood. We all have our preconceived notions of what motherhood means, what it looks like, the things that it entails. But Designing Motherhood created a very specific definition of what motherhood means for us and for this project, and hopefully for the larger audience. So if I can just read that, I hope that it gives like a good lay of the land of maybe where the conversation can go, because it's very expansive. So I'm going to read it. Motherhood is shorthand for acts that go beyond a gender binary and beyond people who have been pregnant or given birth. It is a descriptor that can be embodied, deferred, refused, taken on as a duty or expectation, or otherwise engaged with in all its knotty contours. Motherhood is a myriad. So you can choose to be a mother, you can choose not to be a mother, however you identify yourself, however you show up in the world. If you are experiencing or participating in what you believe to be motherhood, then that's what it is.
Excellent. I'm not sure, because LinYee, actually, you had kind of, I don't know if you had anything to add, considering this was like your really important provocation right before we kind of convened today. So I want to open the floor up to you also to chime in if you wish.
Sure. Gabriella, thank you for kind of giving us some boundaries or actually just kind of opening the box for us around this language around motherhood. And I totally agree with you. I think that my name is LinYee Yuan. I am the founder and editor of Mold Magazine, which is an online and print magazine about design and the future of food. I'm a design journalist first and foremost. And I definitely think a lot about motherhood as a kind of participatory act, and that is beyond the gender binary, as the curators of the Designing Motherhood Project have defined it. So I really appreciate that it's really grounded in just kind of how people self-identify, but also grounded in action in a lot of ways, whether that action is caretaking or birthing or, really however you want to define it. And so I think that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Gabriella.
Yeah, I'm super grateful for kicking off our conversation with that definition, because I think, LinYee, to what you're saying about, motherhood as praxis, right, as a practice, and design as a practice, as well as, a set of cultural practices that people take on in order to build the world around us. And so I'm intrigued to, I guess, follow up with that question about, defining motherhood, with trying to bring some of the threads together between design and motherhood by learning from each of you, what is thinking about motherhood through a design lens mean to each of you? And I thought it could be interesting and fun, perhaps, if any of you could share an example, perhaps, of an object, a space, a system that has influenced or shaped your thinking about how motherhood and design should be thought in relationship to one another.
I can go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know Zoe's probably like, damn, Gabby says this all the time, but design is everything, and everyone is a designer. We all wake up every day and design our own lives. I don't believe you need to have any type of education or professional experience or certification or any of those achievements to consider yourself a designer. It's not just this elite type of schooling or curriculum. To me, that's my idea of design. So design and motherhood is inextricably linked, because there's nothing separate from design. When a mother or a parent wakes up and is braiding their daughter's hair in a heart for Valentine's Day, that's design to me. I don't know, that's a skill. When a parent is like playing real life Chopped in a kitchen and just picking random ingredients that they got left to create a meal for their family, that is a form of design. But for me specifically, I went to design school, I went to city planning school, and I didn't feel like I belonged. So for a long time, I looked at design as that very elite curriculum and schooling that I didn't feel comfortable in, that I was told I shouldn't be in, that just wasn't for me. So there was a separation, but it wasn't until I started to experience my own reproductive issues, and on that journey, when I started to make the connections between city planning and design in that way, and how that can biologically affect a person's ability to get pregnant, be pregnant, have a healthy pregnancy, birth, and parent their children. It was a book that I read by Mindy Full of Love. I forget what it's called. It's not Root Shock. It's not Urban Alchemy. I think it's called Urban Alchemy. And she talked about root shock, which is this idea that when a community is demolished, when the social ties of a community are taken away and destroyed, it has that traumatic stress has a biological effect on you. And of course, in City Planning School, we learn about a lot of policies that destroy communities. I mean, I've worked for organizations and been complicit in some way in those policies for work. So we know about those things. We know about eminent domain, and we know about gentrification, and we hear about Robert Moses and what he did in the South. We know about these things, and I'm like, wow, these design policies that I'm learning about every single day that I'm working in are affecting our ability to have autonomy over our bodies and to be healthy. And that's kind of when design and motherhood merged together for me. And I realized that there is no separation, that is all connected, and systems of oppression are created by design, but they can also be dismantled by design.
Yeah, I love that. I love that what you're saying about connecting, thinking about city planning and our built environment as something that, isn't to be taken for granted, as something that just is, but is compiled by a series of deliberate choices and actions that at least for me, I have definitely been brought into relief about how so much of the world around us, I don't think, is designed for communities and mothers to thrive in the way that they should. So I really value you making those connections.
I also, sorry, Zoe, you should go.
Oh no, you're more than welcome to. I'm happy to piggyback.
I entered into this kind of concept of motherhood when I first became pregnant and realized that I would be birthing a human into this world, and going into and navigating the kind of prenatal stages of motherhood was really, really confusing here in New York. It felt like I had entered into this like secret society where I had to ask one person about, recommendations, to ask another person, to find a midwife, to navigate health insurance. And as somebody who, is, I would say, well-resourced and well-educated, I found it so baffling and hard to navigate. And I realized that the system is not designed for birthing people. It's designed for the insurance company. It's designed for the efficiency of the hospitals. It's designed for efficiencies for the people who are birth workers, oftentimes, OBGYNs or whatever. And, I just was so confused by how at the time it was 2019 or 2018, 2019, how this was still this kind of strange, opaque process where, it's not like I could just go online and be like, what doula should I seek out? Like, how do I find a doula? Like, what is a doula and midwife? Like, what are my midwife options? If I want to do a midwife in a hospital, I had to ask people who knew people who knew people. And so that kind of moment was when it was very clear to what Gabriella is saying, that the kind of birthing or laboring birthing process is definitely not designed for the people who are actually doing that work itself of laboring and delivering a child into the world. So I think that was my kind of entry.
Zoe, I wanted to also make space for you to contribute, because I knew that I think you wanted to chime in right before LinYee went. So go on ahead.
Thank you. Just wanted to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Zoe. My pronouns are she, they. I am a curatorial assistant on Designing Motherhood, and am also a program assistant as my day job. I'm an artist in my free time. I think listening to everybody's experiences has been really interesting. I am personally not a mother myself. I'm child-free. I do not plan on having children. So a lot of what I have learned about motherhood has really been through listening to the experiences of birthing people and what they're going through on a daily basis. I used to work at Maternity Care Coalition, and I think something that was really highlighted during my time there was the talk of like childcare in particular, and also thinking about just the outrageous costs that are involved with sending your child to school, to daycare, and that, you know, this is often like the cost of rent. So if you're a working class person and you really have to figure out, you know, how am I going to eat today? How am I going to be able to afford sending my child to school for thousands of dollars, and also, you know, get to work? How am I going to make ends meet? And I think that's also just been exacerbated by the pandemic. And something that I noticed really early on when we sort of like started the pandemic was a lot of talk, in particular, I think amongst like white middle-class women, about how hard it was to have to like pivot and parent from home, or have to do this by themselves. And something that I was really thinking about was, well, you know, folks of color in particular and working class folks of color have really have been doing this for, you know, prior to the pandemic. This has been an issue for so long, and suddenly, because it's an issue for you, it is something that we're going to write, you know, long, extensive think pieces on, and just the, you know, the toll that plays on a birthing person and his parents' like mental health, and juggling all of that. So I think for me, when I think of, you know, birth and motherhood and design, it's also really based in community, and how we're working together as a community to raise children. And I think in American society, that's not really something that we're focused on, is multiple people helping raise a child and working together to take the onus off of an individual parent in particular.
Can I also add that aside from thinking of motherhood in whatever definition, you know, is good for you, as an experience, I think motherhood can also be looked at as like an institution, like something that kind of creates social norms. But a lot of times, we live in a capitalist patriarchal society, right? So institutions are ran by normally white cishet men. So what does it mean for motherhood to be an institution that is experienced by people that identify themselves as women or femme, or not, however people identify themselves, but it's being ran and decisions are being made by people that do not share those experiences, and how conflicting and oppressive that is for people.
Okay, here's what I found.
I mean,
That's
to your point,
actually-
Gabrielle, sorry.
No, yeah, LinYee, please go ahead.
I mean, to your point, Gabriella, I think that oftentimes motherhood within the context of the United States, within our capitalist patriarchal system, mothers are considered workers. Like, they are just people who work for their children. They are people who work for companies, and it's not like, that's actually more the marker of motherhood as opposed to, you know, caregiving, which is kind of more of the context that I think of, or what Zoe's talking about, which is about, you know, community weaving together, you know, where communities come together to mother children historically, where in our current culture, spaces aren't designed for that. Our kind of capitalist system is not designed for community, for knitting together anything really. It's just about like, what cog in the wheel can you play, and I think that is very problematic. And to Zoe's point, the pandemic really revealed the ways that has just not been serving anyone for the past, you know, for just, it's not serving anyone, period.
Totally. I think this is a really actually great transition to the next question that I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on, Gabrielle, I really like this idea that you say that motherhood is an institution that creates norms, right? About, what it means to be a mother, how it means to experience this type of, shift in roles and responsibilities and identity. And going through this transition, like personally for myself, becoming a parent, and also, having been parented, in prep for this conversation, I've been really trying to reflect on, like, what are the types of cultural narratives that I have around motherhood and parenthood, where I learned about what a mother should be and is. And I actually came across, I was rummaging through some old pictures. That's, one of my mom's, bequeathed to me, basically, like this extensive archive of my entire life. So in her eyes, that's what mothers do, which is like incredible. But I discovered my 8th grade science fair project, which apparently was my first foray into design thinking and motherhood. I created this magnetic like feeding tray for babies. I guess now they have like the suction plates and stuff like that. And the idea was that this product was for the busy career woman. And in the science fair project, I had this ad that I mocked up, that I created, of me with like a million bags, on my arms, holding a baby doll, screaming into a phone, just, pure chaos, right? But for me, that was a really powerful and interesting like portal into like what kinds of cultural narratives and expectations and ideas about motherhood as an institution that I had in those very early stages of my life. Someone who, like Yimi, to your point, is a worker first and foremost, right? And is kind of balancing this or attempting to balance, right? That whole idea of leaning in. I felt like this was like pre-lean in kind of discourse. But yeah, my vision as, my cultural narratives around motherhood as an institution from a very, very early age is very tied to capitalism and this idea of how do I balance, or even fetishizing this idea of balance, right? And I think is reflective of a culture that tells us that work comes first, but family does as well. And these types of naughty contradictions, at least I personally really have to be working through. And so I would love to hear from you all about this idea about perhaps motherhood as an institution that is embedded with these cultural narratives and expectations. And I'm curious to hear from you all, like, what kinds of cultural narratives around motherhood do you think have, shaped design philosophies in your respective fields? And perhaps, where has the design field and beyond, right, done well? And where has it fallen short in imagining who mothers are and can be, and what their desires and needs are for, their life and the people that they care for?
I think that design, going back to this idea of thinking about mothers as workers, I think that oftentimes the design approach to motherhood is like more stuff. Like moms just need more stuff so that they can like continue working for their children and then working for someone else. And that narrative of stuff is just, it starts from the very beginning. It's like, oh, we have like our, list of, I'm totally blanking on what it's called, but like, you have like your list of all the things that you need to buy for to prepare for your baby. And I always tell people, I'm like, honestly, like your baby just needs you and like a safe place where they can sleep. They can't even move anywhere. Like they're good. You're fine. Like, don't stress about this stuff. But this narrative of all this stuff to support the action of motherhood, I think really confuses what the purpose of the mother is, and in my mind, which is a caregiver. Like I think children need attention, maybe more than they need like more stuff. And then also the materiality of those stuffs. Like Marcel, you and I both have very young children, and we know that children literally use clothes, toys for like 2 months, and then that's it. And then it like oftentimes just gets thrown out. And I think that that's a huge problem with the way that we think about approaching design solutions for clothing, feeding, caring for children, especially young children. It's like, it just doesn't make sense.
Right, exactly.
Sorry, go ahead.
Gabriella, go ahead. Yeah.
Like originally, or almost instinctively, when you asked that question, I thought about like the exodus to suburbia and how there was this very intentional, what's the word? There was this very intentional push to what motherhood looked like and what it meant for a mother to be in suburbia and have the white picket fence, and then the father to be working and come back home, working in a city, come back home on this new highway that was built with this new car in their home that they got after they came back from there was this whole story about a specific user when it came to how suburbia was built and glamorized for people. But what does it mean when that is not your story? Like, I think about my upbringing. I mean, I'm from the suburbs of New Jersey, but I was raised in a single parent household like many other people that I know. So what does that mean for our story, and how does it fit or not fit into this idea of what a family is supposed to look like? And I think as like culturally, as we get back to remembering, because remembering who we are, the things that are within us and that are within our parents and our grandparents and our ancestors. I think as we come to this collective remembering, or even like a homecoming, the meaning of family, the meaning of motherhood, the meaning of being a parent or a caregiver becomes so much more expansive than what these ideas are that have been pushed on us. Like, I think about my family and what I want it to look like, what I used to want it to look like, and how when it didn't look like that, it was like, oh my God, I failed. My kid is going to be ruined. And all these ideas and stories that we attach to these stereotypes or these ideas of what a mother should be or what a family should look like, they aren't real. They just aren't real. They were created by somebody who probably wasn't thinking about somebody that looked like me or somebody that looked like you, and they were imposed upon us. And I think as we shed those and unlearn those things, we're more open to what community, family support really looks like, especially in a world that isn't solely about the value that you bring based off of labor, whether it's labor in the workplace or the labor and the sacrifice that you're giving to your child. Like, we are people outside of that still.
Zoe, I wasn't sure if you were going to say something. I was going to chime in, but feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, I think also thinking about like particular design objects, and this is something that Designing Motherhood, like the book, talks about in particular, and one of the exhibitions at the Mother Museum in Philadelphia is also about something, you know, as simple and mundane as like the breast pump, and what the breast pump represents in regards to, you know, what you all have said, this sort of stereotype of the person on the go, and that, you know, you need to be able to juggle motherhood and attend to your child, but at the same time, you know, attend that meeting in your corporate office, and you need to be fast, and it needs to be efficient, and it needs to get done now. So sort of thinking about what those objects represent. And for me, thinking about bad design, there is this thing called the Willow, which is another type of breast pump, but it is really large and clunky. You can actually, I went on YouTube to watch reviews of folks using the product, and it's huge, and it's supposed to be able to, you know, if you wear bras, fit in your bra. But just setting up the object is really hard. It's not intuitive. It's not an accessible design. And it costs hundreds of dollars for an object that has been reviewed as not really being that great. But similar to what folks are saying earlier, there is just this, and due to us living in a capitalist system, this idea of like, well, if you buy more objects, or if you buy something that's expensive, that immediately equates to you being a better parent or a better family member or a better birth giver. And I think disrupting that is really important. And also to Gabriella's point, us as a society sort of shedding this idea of motherhood and parenting as a very binary experience is something that can only occur between a cis man and a cis woman. A friend of mine a very long time ago, we had just had a very loose conversation that stuck with me for years about how she was saying, we're both queer, and she was saying people don't ask her if she plans on becoming a parent or if she wants to have a family as soon as they hear that she's queer. As soon as you say that, it's sort of like, oh, well, you're not having kids, or an assumption that you can't have children. But queer and trans people have had families and have been mothering really for centuries. And what does that mean for us to really liberate ourselves from the insidious nature of capitalism and white supremacy in the binary, for sure.
Yeah, to what you're saying, Zoe and Gabriella, I think that there's a real design opportunity in supporting different kind of community focused designs for motherhood. Like, what does it look like when you are designing for families that are more inclusive beyond just a woman by herself or a woman and a man? Or what does it look like when it's multi-generational models for motherhood? What does it look like when it's non-related, community-driven, place-based models for motherhood? And I think that those are realistically networks that would actually provide a lot more support and care and for birthing people to be really successful at contributing to the care of their own children and or care of other children within their communities.
Yeah, can I add on to that? Like, I think design is, and however you imagine it, is a lovely, it has grown so much, you know, just thinking about technology, even for birthing people, thinking about like how technology is used in the Earth app that is like a Yelp for hospitals and birth workers, so you can get reviews on how they really do. So technology has grown the design field in so many ways, but I think one of the ways that it continues to fall short is that designers still look a certain way for the most part. And how is, just like we were talking about the institution of motherhood being determined and ran by white men, like that, it doesn't work. And the design field in all of its facets needs to make sure that the designers are the people that are being impacted the most. Like, I know I walk around with certain privileges and I don't have certain experiences. I would never want to design a certain policy or a housing situation or anything for someone that identifies as trans. I'm not trans. I can be an ally. I can support. I can uplift. I can provide space. I can give up my space. But that's not my expertise. And not only do the lived experience experts need to be the designers, they need to be compensated as such, like as the experts that they are. And I don't see that nearly enough. Like, to come into this design field is like, you gotta know people. You have to have went to a certain school, and it's that is part of the reason why we see so many designs that just don't work. Designs of policy, designs of objects, designs of so many things. Like, it just doesn't work because the people that it's impacting the most, that it's supposed to serve, are not a part of the creation, the design process.
I think that's one of the reasons why I really look to informal networks as the kind of source of support for the work that I do as a mother. I chose to cloth diaper my child, and so I didn't get any real information from the internet, but instead have gotten all of the information I need about cloth diapering through like Facebook groups that are primarily run by other mothers who are cloth diapering. Same with my youngest child has food allergies, and I didn't understand how to navigate that system. We went to an allergist, and the allergist kind of gave us the medical line, but I was like, but really, like, what am I going to really do? So I joined a Facebook group for mother, like, not even mother, for parents, but really, honestly, like, I have not seen one masculine presenting person on that Facebook group. But really people who are mothers who are navigating the nutritional needs of their children with allergies. And so I think that, like, all of these kind of informal groups, like, those people are not paid for their labor. They're not paid for their expertise. I mean, the administrators are literally on there every single day, multiple hours a day. None of them get paid. Facebook doesn't pay them for sure. And so I think that, like, to your point, Gabriella, like, oftentimes the labor of mothers is unpaid, unseen, unrecognized by any sort of institution. And, even in care, as we understand, whether that's caregivers for children, caregivers for aging people, caregivers for differently abled people, that work is primarily done by brown women, many who are mothers, and that work is also very much unseen. The Domestic Workers Union is one of the most incredible organizations that are advocating for care workers. And I see their work very much entwined with the work of giving the labor and the kind of just due for the work that mothers do. Just very much kind of a similar fight for social justice.
I just want to add, because you made me think, LinYee, and I know Zoe's probably thinking the same thing because this is my partner. I love Zoe so much. I haven't seen her in a while, so I'm really excited. But that is exactly what designing motherhood helped Zoe and I to accomplish as well. A lot of the direct service workers at the organization where we both worked at most of them are Black women. Women of color for sure, but most of them are Black women. And they literally do life and death work. They work all day, all night. Some people are on call. If they're doulas, they're just on call. If they're working with certain populations of people that maybe lack certain boundaries, they're on call still. They work so hard and so much. And we oftentimes are seeing like these headlines of that Black maternal mortality, the 3 to 4 times more likely to, like, I cannot see that. I don't want to read that again. Like, we get it. And maybe I'm projecting and it's just the circles that I'm in get it. But I've seen it so much, it almost feels like a scare tactic. But one of the things that we don't really highlight and talk about, and what we try to do with designing motherhood, is lift up and honor the direct service workers that are doing the work. Not maybe the most glamorous job, or not the most well-known doula or the most well-known lactation consultant, but people that have literally been doing the work for decades, mostly in the city of Philadelphia, that don't get paid well at all. They get the way they are compensated, if it's looked at as a direct correlation of value, you would think that they don't do anything, that the work that they do isn't important, but it's literally life and death. And we created this narrative portraiture series, a series of episodes where we highlighted the direct service workers that are within the organization. So, I mean, that's what we were able to do. We're not able to pay them a higher salary, even though they were compensated for their time, but we're not able to contribute that much to their salary. We can't necessarily change the circumstances of their work, like maybe the physical environments and things like that. But we wanted to take time to center the people that are many times at the margins.
Let's be clear, birth work is sacred work. It is spiritual work. It is life and death work. And the fact that it is not seen as like real work, or whatever that means, within our patriarchal capitalist system is, it is directly correlated with the fact that, birthing people are still considered just workers within that system. You're just birthing a person as part of your job. You're not being given the support or the respect or the kind of, I mean, really just respect. Like the fact that we don't have paid family leave is just totally, it's the most shameful thing, I think, like really to be like, we don't support the people who are birthing and then caregiving for our children. Like what world, I mean, I know what world we live in, but that's just like scratching the surface.
Right. There are definitely more legal protections for corporations than there are for people who give birth, which I think is a very sad state of the impending apocalypse. But I think this is LinYee, your point, and yeah, and Gabrielle and Zoe, your points. I'm just going to try to tie the threads together here before we get to the Q&A. Which, folks, if you have questions for this fabulous panel, please drop those in. But yeah, just thinking about this idea of policy and design, right? Because I know folks are joining in from around the world, but in our shared context of the United States, this lack of paid leave on a federal level isn't an oversight, right? But it's a deliberate design choice, simply because our lawmakers as business leaders don't want us to have these types of affordances for the countless reasons that we could think of their rationale. So I guess I'm curious to hear from you all, from your respective vantage points and how you're entering this conversation, to think about the social policies from both a public, government perspective, and also perhaps from like the private sector as well. Like, what kinds of, if we're thinking big here on like what we need, like what kinds of, and this is a biggie, it's a big one, but we're gonna end with a bang here. What kinds of social policies do you all think must be designed to provide parents, caregivers, mothers with the equitable care, right, for themselves, the tools and the resources that we need to survive, and perhaps connected to that, how can interested people join in these efforts to mobilize for these changes? So, as I said, big question, but necessary one, I think.
I think, you've all have already said it. I think paid family leave is important. I think free healthcare. I think so often, like, if I had the financial resources to move out of the United States of America, I would. It's just tragic that people are in debt for their own health and mental well-being. I think that is first and foremost incredibly important, and we need to really focus on that. I had another thought as well, and it just whooped, it disappeared. Oh, it was, and I think that everybody deserves to have access, regardless of class background, to a doula, to a support network, to folks that are really, that understand where you come from, what your needs are, and what you want, and foreground that. And I think it needs to be tailored to your experience as a birth giver, and as a parent. If you have a disability, or you're queer, or you're trans, or whatever, you deserve to have a space where you feel supported and held. And I think just as important, caregivers need to be cared for as well. Like, folks who are doing this work, not only do they deserve to be compensated for that work, but they also deserve to have spaces and containers of healing where people are listening to the trauma that they are carrying from others. So I think just going back to community in a really real and honest way is incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, I know I work as associate director of policy, but I do not like politics. And a lot of my thinking, honestly, outside of work, is thinking about how we can build community without not waiting on anyone or anything or any institution, but how we can show up for each other. However, I think a good example of a policy that has helped parents across the board is the expanded child tax credit. And we saw there was so just in the short period of time that people were getting access to the advance payments, and hopefully people are going to file their taxes and get the rest of their money. But just even in a short time, we've seen how much that it alleviated child poverty. It gave parents the autonomy to do what they want with their money. Like there was no real requirement. You didn't have to spend it on housing. You didn't have to spend it on food. You could spend it on your child's birthday. I did. If you wanted to, whatever it is that you needed to do as a parent for your family, you were able to do that. And I think that's what a lot of policies lack is they give the illusion of choice, but there is no choice. It's still super patriarchal and parental, and it infantilizes people. And I think if we can think of policies and advocate for policies that really do give people autonomy and give people real choice. Like nobody's making a choice for you. Here's this resource, you do with it what you please. I think that we will find ourselves in better circumstances because, you know, like we said before, we're all the experts of our own lives. We know what we need. I know what I need as a parent to parent my child. Perhaps I could get some advice from other professionals that, you know, are experts in other things, but I know what I need. I'm sure you all know what you need in your lives to do better, to feel secure and safe. So if we can think of policies like the child tax credit, which I know has its issues, but just gives people resources and they do what they want, then we good.
I think that here in New York, we just started free 3K for all, which is that means that children at the age of 3 are not necessarily guaranteed, but can have access to free daycare programs. And I think that having expanded childcare that is provided by your community, provided by your city, is a huge piece of giving parents the autonomy to do what they do best, which is to give care and to choose how they want to spend their time. And I think it also enables a lot of, as we've talked about, caregivers who are largely brown women, a lane for business and a lane for getting, more support for the work that they do. And so I think providing childcare as a foundational service for parents, I think is a huge piece of the deal. And I also think that just in general, postpartum care should really be talked about and part of our kind of experience as birthing people. Like in the United States, once you deliver the baby, that's it. They're like later. And almost every other culture has built-in kind of community-driven net, like a net to help the transition for birthing people from being pregnant to not being pregnant to being a caregiver. And I think that designing for that postpartum period, what is often referred to as the 4th trimester, would also make a huge difference in the lives of birthing people and really setting people up for success. Like I know I just give thanks every day that my mother was able to sit the month with me for both of my children and, cared for me, cared for my partner, cared for my tiny babies and my toddler. Not everyone has that type of community support. And I know that for me, that really set me up for being able to be present for my children in the postpartum period.
Yes, definitely. Shout out to mom. Shout out to my mom who's upstairs making it possible for us to do this without the sound of screams in the background. All of your responses to this question have been so generative. And I think for me, in my postpartum period, I remember feeling so much guilt that the time and support that I did have in the postpartum feeling felt like a privilege. When it really should be a right for all people to have, if they so choose to have this experience and be a birthing person, to do so with dignity and care. And I keep coming back, Gabrielle, to something you said earlier on in the conversation about how, I think if I'm remembering it correctly, that you're talking about how motherhood is like a process of remembering, right? And I think for me, going through, making the choice of having a home birth and the reasons that I had for that. The kind of change that I want to see, at least on a policy and a cultural level, I think is really bringing that idea of the interpersonal and like subjective transformation that parenthood is back to the reproductive and motherhood process, right? That the experience of becoming a parent and becoming a mother isn't, just medicalized as a pathology, as something that needs to be measured and evaluated and diagnosed and be scared of, but is something that we could remember is intuitive to who we are as a species, and to really also normalize this type of expansive network, that village of support, making that normal and not something that's exceptional or something that only a very privileged class of people have access to. So with that, we only have 5 minutes left, and we have a couple of questions that I want to get to from the chat for our last 5 minutes here, if that's all right with y'all. We have a question from Amanda, who asks, states, I love the expansive definition of motherhood, and I wonder specifically about the role of children in this. I find it challenging to mother so many and yet still have a baby who requires so much. We could either let that marinate for a second, and I could present the next question, and maybe we could have responses to both in the responses. So first question is about the role of children in the definition of motherhood. And then the second question we have is for LinYee specifically, but I think we could also expand it out to everyone else. And is you made a point about place-based models being able to benefit mothers. And so our audience members wanted you to talk a bit more about that.
Oh, I mean, I think that the kind of just key to our collective futures is really on place-based models of living and supporting and caring for one another. Obviously, in a place like the United States, where policy is really just driven so regionally, like state by state, when thinking about the support networks that one might have access to, it really depends on where you live. And so I think there's nothing like caregiving for a small person where that really grounds you to a very specific place. For example, I have lived literally a street and a half from a public park here in Brooklyn for over 10 years, but it wasn't until I had children that public park really became part of my daily life. And I just am so thankful for access to public green space. Not only is a place that I can take my very active toddler to go like get his yayas out, but I also meet other parents. I see who my community actually is in that park every single day. And advocating for public space where communities can come together to care for their children, I think is a foundational thing that needs to happen in place. Like it can't happen from some outside place. Like it needs to happen where you yourself have autonomy to talk about the needs that you have for caregiving for your children that are both culturally appropriate and place-based appropriate.
Can I say something really quick? My Piscean mind is thinking about all the things that I said here today, and I just want to address something that I said. And maybe nobody even remembers that I said this, but I just have to. I'm so sorry. It doesn't have anything to necessarily do with the questions, but because I said something else publicly, I want to do this publicly. I made a comment saying that I don't want to see that statistic of Black mothers dying 3 to 4 times more likely than white mothers. And I think that was a crude way of me saying that it is. I feel like in a certain way it's being used as a scare tactic in a way that we highlight the issue and we never really are talking about the solutions and the people. I think it was a very crude way of saying that. And I just want to apologize if anyone in the audience felt offended by that, because it is a scary thing. Like when it was scary when I gave birth and I was knee deep in the research about Black maternal mortality. So I don't want to take away from that. It is a scary thing. And also I don't want to diminish the lives that were lost because they matter, and we should still be talking about them and saying their names and honoring them and joining in on this fight to make sure that, you know, another person doesn't have to deal with that. So I just wanted to say that publicly, because I was just, the wheels were spinning in my head and I said, oh God, I have to make this right. So I just wanted to say that publicly. But to the first question, I think that just how motherhood, it has that expansive definition, so can children. Not to trivialize how, like, the experience of someone parenting an actual human or a dog or a cat or a plant, but we have children in different ways that are biological or not. And I think just as we think motherhood, design is everything, so are children, so are the people that we mother and that we take care of. And I think that is part of the remembering as well, and thinking about community. Like, I see your kid outside, that's my kid too. Like, that's my child. Like, I'm gonna protect your child like I would protect my child as a community. And I think that's something that we should be thinking about as well.
And not to take away from children, because obviously, like, they're very special, but like I just feel that oftentimes that, especially in the kind of pregnancy, labor, birthing process, so much is focused on the health of the child, and no one is talking about the health of the birthing person. And that's why we don't hear about postpartum care. And so again, not to take away from the child, but like, what about this is I think my problem with the idea of the mother being just a worker within this larger system, because you're not worried about like the body of the person. It's like, why do we not all have pelvic physical therapy after giving birth? Why is that not just part of the package? Like, it's because nobody cares. Like, not nobody, but like the system is not concerned about the birthing person. And so, yeah, I just want to put that out there.
And I think something that's also really important to say, and we've definitely hit on it a few times, but just really bringing to the forefront, is that we can have as many policies as we would like. We can have as many like fancy, nice design objects as we would like. But if we still live in a capitalist, anti-Black system, it doesn't matter. Like, because we will be treated and deemed as worker bees that are here to just exploit our bodies and die, which is a very like grim thing to say, but it's the truth. It's how we operate. So I think also folks having a larger understanding of how motherhood, or how your experience as a parent and a caregiver connects to the larger systems that we operate in, because we all are connected and are trying to survive in a system of violence. And we need to imagine and create something beyond this, because it does exist. It can exist. Capitalism has not always been here, even though it feels like it. So I just feel like that's something very important to just hold for a second too, is that there are ways out of this.
Right. We can design a future that's part of the creative work of this, of our, I guess, destiny as humans. I know that sounds a very grand thing to say, but how can we dream and envision more supportive, care-driven, grounded presence and futures? And I think, Zoe, your clarion call is the right type of energy that we have to close out this session today. This is really just coming at a really important time. Like, for me personally, I've been kind of longing to have a kind of conversation like this. So it's been truly an honor to be in conversation with each of you. Folks can certainly check out your contributions to Deem and to the work that you all do out in the world. And I know that Alice is going to cut in shortly to say her goodbyes, but I just, on behalf of me, thank you so much for making the time to have this really important conversation today.
Thank you, Marcel, Zoe, Gabriella, LinYee, for this really insightful conversation. Thank you, Flo and Susan, for your incredible ASL support. And last but certainly not least, thank you everyone that has joined us and attended this and other sessions, all of which will be available to view on YouTube. So until next time, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great time.
Alrighty.
Thanks again.